Um, so yes, I will take the cue from the other admins of this conversation. If I were to start, there'd be another 65 people who will have not caught the start. What do you think? We have time. I guess we can do a little more informal chat before the actual presentation. The presentation itself will take maybe 20-25 minutes only. So we can do the chat in front of the presentation while waiting for others to show up. How about that?
Sige. Yeah.
Sige.
So Dave, maybe
So
you can give an introduction on why you chose ants as your specialization. So an
I lost a
entomology.
bet. Yeah, I
You
lost a
lost a
bet.
what? A bet. Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
Nice.
No, actually, my interest has always been insects, at least in college. And then when I started to study insect taxonomy, different kinds of insects, sabi ko, wow, magaganda ang butterflies, but then they're very hard to work. They're very
Mm.
fragile. Then I like beetles also, but then they're very hard to study kasi very few resources available for that. So I wound up looking at stinging insects. Yun, may challenge. Stinging insects.
Masakit.
So hornets, bees, wasps, and ants. And fortunately for me, I had this parang ano lang naman, amateur interest, which I kept alive while I was farming in Bicol. And then I got a surprise email from a researcher at Harvard University. That small liberal arts college in the Northeast USA. And he wanted to look at the ants of the Philippines, specifically to collect a species called Romblonella opaca. Romblonella, the genus named after the island Romblon. Uh, and so I asked him, what's so special about Romblonella opaca? Well, there's one specimen in the University Museum at Harvard. Is old and moldy. So he wanted to collect a new specimen. Okay. So he shows up in March and I still had classes in Ateneo Dinagat. And so I said, why don't we visit my uncle's farm near Mount Isaro, just for you to do something and look at what we have there. In the farmstead of my uncle's katiwala or caretaker, we found already something like 30 species of ants in a disturbed area like the homestead. Okay. Now, just to give you a comparison, dun sa study site ko sa Arkansas, where I did a couple of months of surveying, we found 47 species. Ito, isang morning visit lang, just poking around in the homestead, about 30 species na, including a species of ant that we found inside a piece of firewood, which our katiwala decided to keep until we visited. Kasi nakita niya, may laman yung kahoy. So when we were there, he broke it open, and sure enough, there was a nest of ants, and there were beetles inside the nest, together with the queen. So, of course, that was a real surprise. And especially for this guy, Gary from Harvard, because that was his dissertation at Harvard. He wrote a 900-page dissertation, 2 volumes, on beetles associated with ants. And he never saw that kind of a beetle during his PhD study. Talaga nabulaga siya. So, he said, let's look at Romblonella some other time. Let's do a study in this area. So that's when he really hooked me. I got hooked we did our transect study. I learned the field techniques, and then we did our laboratory work. During the laboratory work, we actually discovered 15 genera of ants not known to exist in the Philippines at that time. This was in 2003. The first few discoveries we made, we were arguing kasi the reference said, it is this genus. And he says, no, that genus is not known to exist in the Philippines. So it was an argument. It's a scientific argument. And
Mhm.
we go through the key again, and then he goes to that same name again, and finally says, okay, I will scope the insect. You read the reference. He was actually reading the reference, and I was saying this and that, this and that. So the reference is really an identification key. It's dichotomous. You come to a point, and it says this or that. There are opposite conditions palagi. Okay? Until you come to a name. And so it came to a name, and let's say it's called Discotheria. And he said, no, there's no Discotheria in the Philippines. Well, that's what the book says. We'll do it over again. And it goes to Discotheria again. So he says, I'll scope, and you look, and you read. And of course, being an ant expert, first time he looks at it, he sees it's Discotheria. But he says, for rigor, for scientific rigor,
The migrant.
let's read it. And then, sure enough, it's Discotheria. So we go through this argument 2 or 3 times. And then he gets convinced we are actually discovering things. Now, what he was doing then, at that point, he was watching us sort the ants on the Petri dish. Ako, ang habit ko, yung pinaka-interesting sa akin, ilalayo. I would keep that for the last. And that guy, Gary, was watching me. And he says, I want to see that immediately. The one that you put away. Yung tinatabi ko. Gusto niyo makita. Pambihira naman. I was setting that for last, but he was the guest, so he was accommodated. Anyway, so 15 genera were discovered at that time in 2013, 2003. By the time our paper came out, it's actually a book, 111 pages. By the time our paper came out, Gary and I, we could only list 10 because there were some new records of the genus published in other papers. But still, that paper of 2011, we reported 10 genera not known in the Philippines at that time. And after that publication, I think I added another 10 genera, including one that I described myself in 2015. So, why the Philippines? Because the Philippines is amazing for ants. It turns out, sabi ng mga taga-Harvard, the Philippine ant diversity is something like Madagascar on steroids. Kasi yung pala, ang generic diversity ng Madagascar is only about 70 genera. Tayo, we already have 102 yata, and counting. And counting, di pa tapos. Kasi kakaunti pa lang ang areas na survey for ants. We might wind up with as many as 110 or so, which is comparable to the Brazilian Amazon. Something like that.
Oh.
Yeah, just something like that. Borneo has about 103. So we're close to Borneo. In terms of species, they estimate about 1,000 species at least, the Philippines. In our list, we have about 558. So another 400 or so to go. And we basically trip over new species wherever we look, the Philippines. Yeah. So yeah, it's exciting to study ants in the Philippines. And the last guy who studied ants in the Philippines was a Harvard professor, the late Dr. James W. Chapman. He was a Harvard professor, then he decided to transfer to the Philippines, to Silliman College in the 1910s, and then became a professor there. But since it was his passion also to study ants, he studied the ants of Mount Cuernos de Negros in near Dumaguete. So a lot of his collections I've seen in Harvard, in the collections, and there are still amazing discoveries to be made in his collection. So even though he has made many discoveries, ako rin mismo, I typically trip over, natitisod na lang It's a new species. Just to illustrate, about a month ago, I collected an ant called Dayakama. It's it's pronounced Dayakama. Dayakama in a farm in Candelaria because I am collaborating with a Japanese researcher on the breeding of Dayakama, reproductive strategy. Anyway, so about 30 meters from this big house in Candelaria, in the farm in Candelaria, I see a nest of Dayakama. And I collect it for breeding, for culture. It's actually right beside me here. So this box contains those ants. I can't show you kasi mabubuhos. And when I was examining a specimen of those Dayakama ants, it looks like it's a new species. It's nothing close to any known Dayakama species in the Philippines. So, again, 30 meters from a big house in the farm in Candelaria, there's an ant species just walking around. Nobody was looking. I wasn't looking until I discovered it. I mean, I collected it for culture. Bagong species pala. That is how easy it is to collect new species in the Philippines.
Wow.
At least for insects. Ha? Kaya yung mga entomologists who do taxonomy on insects, palaging nadadagal yung trabaho. I have about 60 species to describe. We already know they're new species. We just don't have the time to do the work to give them names, describe them, and so on. Okay sana eh, kaso I'm retired. I don't get a salary anymore for doing this stuff. Anyway, for everybody, I was complaining a while ago, just to share with you, I was complaining a while ago about this background. Kasi, oh, this one. It's not an ant. Ayoko nun eh. This is a leaf insect. And we were just talking about this one. Doc M, had mentioned that Pigafetta discussed the leaf insect, but he didn't know it was a leaf insect. Pigafetta thought it was sorcery, where Filipino witches or sorcerers were able to make the leaves walk at night. At that time, when Pigafetta visited the Philippines with Magellan, they didn't know that some insects looked like leaves and could walk. And they're active at night. So yeah, they were walking at night. The leaves. So what do you think? Should we proceed?
I think we should start.
Okay.
Yes, can start.
Oh, so now I will share my screen. Let's see how I go about this. I do not have a button for sharing the screen.
We are checking.
Okay.
It's below yung chat and share screen. It's tabi ng
Yun, the green.
Yeah, the green one.
Bakit ako naghahanap sa taas? I was looking up there. It used to be up there. Kunwari, palusot. Okay, let me share the screen. And let's see. Why am I not seeing my... Do you see it?
There you go. We can see.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let me see. Let me adjust that. And then here we go. So this is the title assigned to me, Philippine Native Trees and Insects in Harmony. My alternative title is this. It's 120 million year old LQ, Lover's Quarrel. And I will discuss that. It will become a little clear later. So really, I'm talking about insect and tree interactions. I mentioned to Sel a while ago that I have subliminal messaging, and it might be a little obvious here in this slide. Anyway, so this is the outline, herbivory, and I will discuss herbivory and three defenses: pollination, protection, myrmecochory. Akala nyo wala kayong new words that you will encounter. So this is one of the new words you will encounter: myrmecochory, and fertilization and nutrient transfer. So there will be a few more vocabulary words that you will encounter later. And I might have a quiz next week. Okay. So herbivory and tree defense. Obviously, this is what our concern is. We observe that there are injuries to our tree seedlings, our saplings, our trees, our plants. And we see that typically in the leaves and in the stems. What is not very obvious is damage to the roots. There are insects that damage roots, including sap-sucking insects that ants place there in the roots. So you don't even see them, they're underground. But still, they will suck the sap and damage your plants. So that is herbivory. But para sa akin, herbivory is actually positive kasi that is the only process by which plants can transfer nutrients and energy from their tissues to animals like us. Diba? Without herbivory, we would not be here. We are all herbivores, I hope. Ako am a second-hand herbivore. I eat the first-hand herbivores, like the beef cattle. But yeah, I also have to eat leaves or vegetables or rabbit food. So injuries are the most obvious sign of herbivory. And my talk here is to try to change your perspective to see the positive side of herbivory. And also the other different interactions of insects with trees. Now, herbivory also is a venue or avenue for infections to be transmitted to the plants. And these may be fungal infections, bacterial infections, and even viral infections. Again, these are not all completely negative. Kasi, for example, for fungal infections, so there may be in an adult tree a large fungal infection, which then causes a cavity to be formed in the tree. That now becomes habitat. Habitat for birds that will need that nest space, like maybe something called the hornbill, if it's large enough, diba? Or even mammals like the cloud rats. So these large injuries in old trees are habitat, very important. Without the fungal infection, those holes in habitat holes, nest holes, will not even be present. Kaya down the road, those become positive also. Okay, so bacterial and viral infections naman are selection processes or selection pressures. They select out the susceptible individuals, leaving a population that becomes less and less susceptible over time. Di ba? So in comparison, for example, in the African savanna, you have all these fast-running wildebeest, and then you have fast-running lions and cheetah and whatever. Only the slowest of the wildebeest will be caught by these predators. So the rest become faster and faster kasi only the fastest wildebeest will survive to breed. And that improves over time, that improves their running ability. Yun among lions and predators, only the fastest of them will catch one of those wildebeest, and then they will survive. The slowest of these lions and predators will not survive. So this kind of pressure by infections, bacteria, fungus, and viruses is a pressure of selection on these plant populations, and that forces them to be the better ones. Sila yung mabubuhay. Okay, so there's always a negative and a positive. Now, let me discuss a little bit about the benefits of herbivory. The first benefit I can see is that there will be a presence of insectivorous birds, songbirds, like the one on the left, the magpie robin. Um, but the one on the right is actually a frugivore. So a tree that is able to bear fruit, for example, the alim and the different figs, will attract the yellow-vented. But the magpie robin will need to eat insects that are in the trees, mainly caterpillars and whatever have you. So without your herbivorous insects in the trees, you won't see a magpie robin. Sayang. So if you're seeing these birds around, then you have things that they can eat, and you will enjoy the songs that they sing in the morning. Um, I don't know if you can search for their song online, but I guess you can. Maybe dun sa uh, one of those university sites in the US. For all of a sudden, I forget. Anyway, so the first is insectivorous birds, songbirds. The second is you will see butterflies and other colorful insects. This is an example of a butterfly that is produced by a caterpillar that eats your citrus, your calamansi, your dalanghita, right? If you want to see butterflies like this, well, you'll probably have to pay rent. You'll have to pay in terms of the number of leaves that the caterpillar needs to eat to become a butterfly. Even so, it's not assured. No? They may eat your 20 leaves of calamansi, but then in the pupal stage or as a chrysalis, there will be another insect that will lay an egg inside, and you will not find the butterfly. But that's how it is. That is the circle of life. So another benefit of herbivory is you have your colorful butterflies and other insects. Another benefit is leafcutter bees. During the Christmas, sorry about that. During the Christmas party last December, I saw a seedling with leaves similar to this, damaged similar to this on the left. Some of you will remember that. All of these scalloping on the edges of the leaf. And I shared with them that this is a sign of leaf cutter bee activity. And you see on the right, in flagrante delicto, a leaf cutter bee cutting off a portion of the leaf. Now, you might want to look at these leaves if you have them in your farm, in your area. And you might want to examine the side, the different scalloping, right? So you see that there are two kinds of scalloping here. You see the oval scalloping, like on the left margin of that leaf. And sometimes you will see a round scalloping, round damage, like here on the third cut on the right side. You see a round circle damage there. Okay. This round cut is used by the bee as a cover or a cap for the nest. So what it does is it cuts the oval and makes a bowl, makes inside a cavity, like a hollow stem. It lines that cavity with that oval leaf, and then it fills that cavity with pollen and nectar. Right. The pollen, you can see it the bottom side of the abdomen here, yellow spot. That's where it would gather its pollen. So it will fill that cavity with pollen. If there is enough already and nectar, it will lay an egg and then cut or maybe apply that round cut leaf there as a cap. So if you can count your number of caps, a number of the round cuts, then you have a rough estimate of how many megachile leaf cutter bees will be present in the next generation, which may be just next month. So it's interesting to be looking around and estimating things like that about bees that you will probably not even see, but you can have an estimate just based on that round cut there on that picture. Okay. Now, how about tree defenses? Of course, trees are not defenseless. There are mechanical defenses and chemical defenses. Mechanical defenses are spines, thorns, waxy leaves, and even thick bark. No? So those are mechanical defenses. But the spines here on the rattan, illustrated here, are not necessarily for insects, but rather for larger animals, maybe mammals and reptiles. Definitely, insects will not be deterred by these large spines. They're too small. They can walk in between those spines. It won't bother them. What will bother them would be the chemical defenses, like irritating or toxic sap. You're familiar with the lipa. Those are stinging hairs. They have trichomes. These are very fine hairs that are actually made of glass, okay, silica, and they break off very easily. But then, because they're glass, they're also very sharp. And when they break off, the liquid inside that trichome is released. And that is the irritating part. So those are the chemicals inside the hairs are those that will really irritate you. Okay. And then we have the repellents. Now, trees are able to send off repellent chemicals. Sometimes we probably will not notice those, but the insects will. And this is funny because some insects naman have developed the ability to search for those repellent chemicals and target or zero in on the source of those chemicals. So instead of being repelled, they're actually attracted. Bumaliktad na yung response nila. Okay. So, kumbaga, it's another type of LQ where the tree is trying to repel the insect, but the insect is now attracted to the repellent. So the tree now must develop another chemical defense to repel the attracted insect. I hope that makes sense to you. Okay. Now, pollination. This one is one of the more commonly understood insect and tree interactions. And we typically observe this as the only positive interaction between insects and trees and plants. And why do I say that this is at least 120 million years old? Insects are older than that. They're about 300 to 400 million years old, depending on what they're looking at and the authority, however they analyze the data. And trees and plants are probably another also 300 million years old, maybe less. But the most or the least controversial fossil of a pollen is 120 million years old. In other words, everybody who sees that fossil pollen understands it to be a tree pollen, okay, or a pollen of an angiosperm, because it's tricolpate. There are 3 grooves in the pollen grain. So it is undisputably tree or angiosperm pollen. So because it's 120 million years old, I assume that at that time there were already insects that were eating that type of pollen. So it's at least 120 million years. Now, what happens here in pollination? Well, the tree or the flower offers a bribe, which is the pollen. Pollen is highly nutritious. It is a source of protein for insects. And for example, bees, which were originally carnivorous insects, a certain line of bees decided to become vegetarian and concentrate only on eating pollen. That line of bees became the bees that we know. The older insects, wasps or hairy wasps that remained carnivorous became wasps. So meron talagang separation. The difference between bees and wasps is that bees eat pollen. Wasps may eat pollen, but they eat meat also. They're more carnivorous, among other things. No? So they can be also morphologically differentiated, but bees will eat pollen, which is plant food or plants, while wasps will eat meat, other insects, etc. So the flowers offer pollen as a bribe. Pupunta yung insect, lakad-lakaran, kunin yung pollen, and in the process, some pollen attaches to its body, and when it transfers to the next flower, that some of that pollen is transferred to the next flower, and so on and so on. So that is pollination. Another bribe that the flowers may offer also is nectar. Okay. But there are many flowers that have no nectar. It's really the pollen that is more important. Among insects, the pollinating insects are bees, wasps, butterflies, flies, beetles, and ants. For example, in lanzones, I don't think they've found the pollinating insect for lanzones. Lanzones flowers are so small, there are no petals, there's no pollen to be taken, there is no stamen, nothing attractive, and yet gets pollinated because there are seeds that are produced. The only implicated insect so far is an ant, Dolichoderus thoracicus. Implicated lang, wala pang direct evidence. So circumstantial evidence pala. But it's an ant. So I'm happy to say that. Okay. Among the vertebrates naman, we have birds, bats, small mammals, and marsupial. Okay. Bats, of course, are responsible for pollinating durian. So the durian flower opens at night so that the bats are around. Otherwise, the flowers are closed. Okay. Oops, why am I not going down? I'm trying to go down to the next slide. Oh, let me do this. Oh, there. Okay. Now, protection. This one is not very obvious. Insects actually protect trees, right? And I have a few examples here. The weaver ants, I will discuss weaver ants. I will discuss extrafloral nectaries and other bribes. There we go again with the bribes. And some insects are also predators of the herbivores. In so doing, by being predators of herbivores, they are protecting the plants or the trees. Ayaw pa rin. Let me try this. So I need to do this button. Okay. So weaver ants, yes. They are predators of many herbivorous insects. And they improve fruit quality. In Cambodia, I think it was, or Laos, they conducted a study where they excluded weaver ants from certain chico trees and then allowed other chico trees to have weaver ants, right? And at the harvest, they gathered those fruit and they brought the fruit to a market in another town and asked the buyers in the market, which would you prefer? Simple question, which would you prefer? The buyers, the people there just didn't know what they're looking at and just said, I want that one. I would prefer this one. They always pointed to the fruit that came from the trees with the weaver ants. So that showed immediately that there is actually benefit to fruit trees. This is the first insect that people have used for biological control of pests. There are Chinese records of orchard growers in China transferring nests of these weaver ants to their newly planted orchards. And those records are maybe 1,000, 2,000 years old. So they are the first insects that people have used for biological control. Problema is that they sometimes also may tend sap-sucking insects. Now, sap-sucking insects are herbivores. They suck the sap of your plant, causing the leaf to curl up and die and all that. And these weaver ants like it, so they will tend those things. So that is one downside. Another downside is if your kaimito tree or your mango tree has weaver ants, it's difficult to harvest. Talagang you will have to pay rent. But for the quality of the fruit and the number of fruit that will develop, I think it's a small price. Now, I asked a German researcher, a national scientist in the US. By this time, he had been studying weaver ants in his laboratory in Germany and in Arizona for about 40 years already. So live colonies. So I asked him, okay, Bert, how do you gather live colonies to bring back to Germany? What does your field person wear in the field to pick up that seething mass of ants and contain it, right? So when you're attacking the nest itself, the defensive mechanisms or their defensive attitude is very intense. And so that guy, the guy who lost the bet, will have to suffer the defensive behavior of these ants. So I asked him, what does that guy wear? The guy who will collect those colonies. And he said, he just wears a spandex bathing trunks or swimming trunks. Yung skin tight, walang masisingitan ng langgam. And he's bare, he has no shirt, no nothing else. Maybe goggles for the eyes, I don't know. But that's it, because any ants that crawl on him can be brushed off by his companion. And nothing goes under his swimming trunk. So he doesn't have to be bothered over there. But I'm sure it's a painful experience. At least it minimizes the number of ant bites. By the way, the pain of the ant bite is caused not by a sting, but by formic acid that they spray on your skin. What they do is they pinch your skin with their very sharp mandibles and then spray in the little wound that they have caused on your skin. Yeah, it will tell you that it has bit you. Okay. So what about extrafloral nectary? I don't know if you're familiar with this. These are structures of the plant that release nectar. Extrafloral meaning it's not in the flower. So in this picture here, you have chromatogaster ants on the extrafloral nectary of Lea guineensis. And this picture was actually taken in Panay Island, I believe, by Dr. Curio, the late Dr. Curio. And you will see on the screen the reference. Dr. Curio used to work in a research facility in Northwest Panay Island. Okay, so what do these nectaries do? They release nectar at some random, I believe at random times of the day and probably at night. That forces the ants to continue to patrol the plant just in case there's nectar that is released. So they have to continue walking around, basically covering the whole plant with ants. Hindi naman mababalot, no? But there's always an ant in all of those parts. So for a certain amount of sugary liquid, the plant is protected by ants. And I've actually seen that in a small bush somewhere in Rizal, and I was really amazed kasi talagang you can see the ants are very protective. When I was trying to cut off the branch, they didn't like it and they told me. So they were very defensive. Okay, so nectaries, extrafloral nectaries are very effective for protecting the plant. Always talking about the plants, because the ants are very territorial when it comes to these things. Okay, now predaceous insects. So many insects are predaceous, and by being predaceous, they eat herbivorous insects. Okay. And here in this picture here, I see a huge firefly larva. Well, actually, I don't know the scale, but this is a giant African snail, and it is about to eat this snail. Right. Now, all firefly larvae are predaceous. So that gives you a clue how to go about inviting fireflies in your farm. allow snails, maybe actually the smaller the snails, the micro snails would be better rather than these African giant snails. Why? Because this giant African snail, of course, is also found in Malaysia. This picture was taken in Malaysia. But I don't know if this particular firefly species is found here in the Philippines. There are about a couple of dozen species of fireflies, many undescribed in the Philippines. I would really like to study firefly diversity, but I just don't have the time. Too many ants to look at. Okay. So adult flies may also be predators. Many of them also eat pollen, so they can also become pollinators. But if you want to have fireflies in your area, you need to have snails. The micro snails would be great because most of our fireflies are very small and their larvae would be about the same body size or even probably double their size. Pero ganun pa rin, maliliit lang. Okay. Other predaceous insects are wasps, like your hornets and lapinig, lihilulumbo, things like that. You might consider them to be pests because they sting, but they're actually your friends because they hunt caterpillar. Don't you want that to happen? And then you have beetles, you have rubber flies, dragonflies. All dragonflies and damselflies are predatory. And you have true bugs. Now, true bugs, they have those little stylet, which they use to inject venom or digestive fluids and then kill their prey. Or they also use that to suck sap. So your sap-sucking insects have that stylet as well. Now, how can you tell if they're predaceous or herbivorous? You just have to observe. Okay? Cicadas are all herbivorous. If you don't want cicadas, then dig up the soil because that's where the larvae are or the nymphs, and then destroy them. You won't have cicadas. So then you'll have a quiet night. No, I'm just kidding. It's very hard to remove all the cicada nymphs in your area. Anyway, so that is about predaceous insects. Let's go further. Myrmecochory. Yeah, this is your new vocabulary term. Seed dispersal by ants. That's what it means. So a lot of plants have developed seeds that have a little tissue attached to the seed that is attractive to ants. And that tissue is rich in lipids, fats, some sugars maybe, and maybe some amino acids. So think of a seed with a little bit of lanzones attached to it. Okay? So baliktarin mo, yung seed malaki, maliit yung lanzones ng tissue na nakakabit doon. That is what attracts the ants to the seeds. And they will pick it up and take it home. And this is a picture of a seed. It's now called a diaspore, which is a seed plus the elaiosome. The elaiosome is this orange tissue here on the top of the seed, right? And that is what attracts the elaiosome is what attracts the ants to pick up the seed. They'll take it home, bring it to the nest. The larvae will eat the elaiosome, and then the ants will discard the seed. Now, typically, the ants will discard the seed in their garbage pile inside the nest or just outside, maybe in another cavity. And that now is a very nice place for a seed to be because there's all sorts of organic matter which are decomposing or have decomposed. So you have a compost pile, you have the seed there, you have protection by the ants. What more do you want as a seed? So it becomes now an ideal place to germinate. And when they germinate, they will push out without any fear of any seed predator or seedling predator. Kasi that stem will shoot out of the ant nest right beside it, and there will still be those ants walking around. So it's an ideal situation for many seeds. Now, I don't know if there are many tree or plant species that produce diaspores in the Philippines. But worldwide, there are about 3,000 plants recognized already that are producing diaspores, okay, or that take advantage of myrmecochory. Let me show you another picture of ants removing the seeds from the seed pod itself. So these are Pristomyrmex pungens. We don't have that species of ant here, but we do have that genus. We have about 15 species of Pristomyrmex in the Philippines. And it's not unlikely that they will do this behavior as well. So that white tissue there is attached to that black seed. And they're taking home the whole thing because they want to feed that white tissue to their larvae. After which that seed now becomes trash, which they throw in the trash bin, which is their compost pile. And the seed is very happy. Okay. So that is myrmecochory. Now, my last topic is fertilization and nutrient transfer, also known as myrmecotrophy. Myrmecotrophy. So another vocabulary term, myrmecotrophy. Now, ant nests are usually rich in plant nutrients. That's because they have a garbage pile somewhere nearby. It may be in another chamber, like I said. And that garbage pile is continually added to with other trash, which are insect parts and uneaten parts, and maybe their own larval skins and whatever. And plant roots will penetrate those garbage piles, those middens, and absorb the nutrients. So it's very difficult to prove that this ant is fertilizing this nearby tree, but it's not unlikely. It's not unlikely. It is bound to happen. Now, if you want to dig it up and see the roots, that's fine, but I don't really have to. I've seen, this was an experience of mine in Arkansas. One of the widespread pest ants there is the fire ant, the red imported fire ant. And it builds those vertical mounds of soft soil, even in pastures. And from a distance, you will see where that mound is because there's first a mound. But over on it, growing on top of it is lush pasture grass, malago. It's very lush. And it's darker green than the rest of the pasture grass around it. I walk up beside the pasture every day from my apartment to the university. And I observe those pastures because I love to see the cattle that are there also. One time, it was funny because I think one of the cattle were really curious, maybe hungry, I don't know. Decided to take a bite of the grass growing on one of those mounds. Boom. And in that particular moment, when it took a bite, it got stung on its nose, and I saw it jump back 2 feet or maybe a meter in reaction to the stings on its nose. So yeah, that's where I saw that. Okay, it's an effective defender of its nest. And I'm sure that that cow will never taste the grass growing on ant nests anymore. So anyway, those grass growing on the ant nest clearly show that the soil in the ant nest is really more nutritious because they're darker green and more lush than the rest of the pasture. Okay. Now, Dobler and Wilson in 1990 mentioned that direct fertilization by ants has been demonstrated by the guy named Huxley and another guy, Rickson, using radioisotopes on Hypnophytum and Myrmicodia. These two plants are epiphytes. They stick to the trees. And I think we have both of these genera of plants in the Philippines. What they observed was when they cracked open these two plants have bulbous stems. Okay, they have a bulbous, mukhang bubilya. So anyway, they have a bulbous stem, and you crack it open, there are already cavities in there. When there are no ants, there are already cavities. And the cavities are either smooth or they have these warts. And the hypothesis then was these warts are a different structure for the plant to use what is in there. Now it turns out the ants naman prefer to throw their garbage in the chambers, the cavities that have those warts. And then they grow their larvae, their brood, in the smooth chambers. So what these guys, Huxley and Rickson, did was they fed the ants with radioactive isotopes. You have the money. If you have the money, you can do that. We don't have the money. And they determined that having fed the isotopes to the ants through the larvae, eventually they found those isotopes in the plant tissues. And when they examined also where the plant tissues were, they were more or less in those warty areas. So the chambers with the warty areas were absorbing nutrients from the trash. Okay, so that was direct fertilization. Dito sa atin naman, more recently, maybe in the 2010s, just the last decade, I read of another radioisotope study where they fed ants with radioactive sugar. Okay, no, the carbon was carbon 14 yata, so it's slightly radioactive. So they fed them sugars with carbon 14, and then eventually they saw that the leaves of the trees had carbon 14. When the ants poop on top of the leaves, the carbon 14 was absorbed by the plant. So the plant leaf was able to absorb ant poop. Yeah, so there's also direct fertilization on the leaves, not necessarily in the ground from the nest, but on the leaves itself. So it makes sense for plants to attract their ant friends, not only to protect them, be their bodyguards, but also to poop on their leaves so that they can absorb nutrients. Okay, so again, that is another loving relationship between insects and plants and trees. Okay, in synthesis, which I'm supposed to do, in the big picture, insects and trees benefit each other in the big picture when you look it over. In fact, like I said, herbivory is the basis of all animal life. We need that. We need to do that, even though there are also clearly negative effects. So that's where you have an LQ. The positive, your negative, positive, negative. You know that. Even in human relationships, there are LQs. Our native trees are part of our natural environment and must survive under natural pressures of herbivores, diseases, and other stresses. They must survive. Otherwise, they're not supposed to do it. Finally, sometimes we just don't recognize or appreciate beneficial effects of insects on trees. Like I said, vermicockery, direct fertilization, and protection. Those are not usually recognized. But I hope that I share this with you effectively, and hopefully now you will begin to appreciate and look over what you have there and enjoy it and appreciate it. Thank you very much, and I will have questions. These pictures, by the way, are from the ant room at Harvard, and that is the late Dr. Ed Wilson, one of the great myrmecologists of this century and the previous century. Thank you. I'll now stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Dave. That was certainly very interesting. You know, everyone, just a round of applause. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. More than a few new terms that we've learned. There are also tongue twisters, myrmecotrophy being one of them. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Myrmecotrophy, yeah. It's close enough.
I will practice.
Thank you.
There are a number of questions that were placed in the chat box that I plan to bring up, or I'll give the ones who place that in the chat a chance to bring that up. But Doc M just gave a quick reminder that we should take a photo. And I know, Basil, if you don't mind, we will ask everyone to turn on their cameras, give us a chance to capture all the photos, because There are quite a number of us, and that's going to be a few tiles.
Yes, it's going to be 3 batches. Thank you.
So
Don't
give your
worry,
best
everyone. We
song,
will try
everyone.
to answer the questions, or Dr. Dave will try to answer the questions. But first, let's take a picture for posterity. Okay, smile. Okay, thank you very much. Back to you, Tammy.
Thank you, Basil. Okay, also just a quick reminder that while it's 11 a.m., we are extending our session because we do want to have a meaningful conversation with everyone. So we encourage you to please hang on and stay in our session. So Dave, like I said, there were a few questions raised, and I'm going to read them out real quickly because I noted them. There was a certain Oliver Mapile, and I couldn't read your first name, Oliver, so I hope it's okay to call you Oliver. But he said, "Good morning, sir. Would like to ask if there have been studies or collections made in the Ilocos region."
Is he referring to ants?
Sir Oliver, ants po ba, or are you talking about other specific insects? While Oliver tries to
Oh,
maybe
ants. Yeah, I suppose yes. But actually, few. There are few because you see, there are not that many ant enthusiasts. Many people avoid ants. They think it's boring or it's because they sting, so they avoid them. It's also, like for example, in the Philippines, there are only 2 people who study ants seriously. There are a few who did their thesis, undergraduate thesis on ants, and then changed direction and just became a medical doctor. So yeah, there are a few. There are a few Ilocos collections, but certainly we will welcome more. The Philippines is very poorly collected for ants, even for any other insect. Very poorly collected, and you will greatly have we'll have a chance to encounter new species easily, very easily. It's crazy easy. I hope that answers the question.
I think if he has more questions about the Ilocos region and the ants that they have there, he can certainly ask that directly next
Yes.
time. Meanwhile, we have other questions. We have Miss Elena Pakuldar who said, "How do the snails encourage the presence or growth of fireflies? Can you expound more on this, please?"
Yes, thank you. That's a very good question. See, the micro snails or the snails, well, what do? First, they eat dead leaves, detritus. They are detritivores. Some of them will eat live leaves. So they are either herbivores or detritivores. And they are the prey of firefly larvae. Now, fireflies will not lay eggs where there's no food for their larvae. That is just typical behavior that they've developed over millions of years. They will not waste their eggs just laying them anywhere and then bahala na yung mag-hatch kung may makakain o hindi. That is not an evolutionarily successful strategy. So they have developed the ability to find places where their larvae will survive because there is food for them. Diba? Does that make sense? So when you have a habitat which is friendly to snails, meaning you don't spray too many chemicals, too many harsh chemicals, you don't burn your leaf litter, right? And you don't prune heavily. You allow certain amount of herbivory, which may be done by snails. Maybe, maybe. But anyway, if you allow a certain level of herbivory, then you allow all sorts of herbivores to happen, to be around. And you allow all sorts of predators to feed on those herbivores. And if you're fortunate, some of those herbivores will be your microsnames. And then you might have fireflies laying eggs in your area na. Okay, now how do you encourage your fireflies as they develop into adults to stay there? Because with wings, they can fly off anywhere else, right? What you do is first you remove as much as possible, you minimize light pollution. If you're fortunate to be in a rural area where there's not much light, but still light from your house and light from your street lamp, or maybe from security lights around your house, then I would suggest very strongly that you convert them to their motion sensor lights so that they're off most of the time and they turn on only when there is a cat or a person walking around. Also tie your carabao so that it doesn't walk into the light and then turns on the light every so often. No, actually the carabao is tied up. But yeah, you have if you have those light sensitive, no, motion sensitive switches on your lights, then you will keep your area dark most of the time. And that will minimize your light pollution. Now, fireflies communicate only by light, mostly by light. No, mostly by light. There are a few species that don't produce light, would you believe? And they communicate with chemicals. But our fireflies, the fireflies we want to watch, communicate by light. And if you have very strong lights around your house, then just watch the fireflies on YouTube, whatever other videos you can watch. There's no way. You have to turn off the lights. You have to make it dark. By the way, in the Philippines and in Southeast Asia, we have a type of firefly na titisod na dilaw, which is called synchronous firefly. What does that mean? They flash in synchrony. So if you have a tree with synchronous firefly, talagang they're flashing very synchronously. Napakaganda panoorin. And I've seen that actually in inland areas like in Sipocot, Camarines Sur. But they are also found in mangrove areas. So Dr. Jen will be happy to know that in mangrove areas, there will be synchronous fireflies. So you start with having the food there, the snails, and then you encourage them by not applying harsh chemicals, encourage them by not having strong lights or bright lights at night. And hopefully also encourage them by not burning your leaf litter. Why? Because, and don't mow your lawn too short. The female fireflies are hiding in the leaves of the leaf litter. They're hiding in the grass. They're hiding on the ground somewhere there. If you remove their hiding areas, wala na. Lalayas yun. So you have the snails, you have the dark, but you have no hiding places for the female fireflies. Go to YouTube. Watch it on YouTube. Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Elena.
Thank you, Dave. Hopefully, with these steps, we are able to see more fireflies in our respective areas. There are actually a few more questions, but I have Ronald actually raising his hand. So, Ronald, if you can unmute yourself, you can speak.
Unmute, yan. Am I being heard by everyone?
Yes, yes. Hi, Ronald.
Hello, Dave, Dr. Dave. I have a question. Is there a direct correlation between the presence of termites and ants? Or put it this way, are ants and termites antagonistic to each other, or maybe even helping each other?
Okay, those are good questions. They are actually at war with each other. They've been at war for hundreds of millions of years. So termites have developed defenses against ants. And you will be amazed that the termites have a soldier caste, and their main function is to defend the nest, their colony, against ants. And they are specialists. The termite soldiers are specialists against ants. They have all sorts of defenses. They can spray toxic chemicals against the ants using a sprayer than a shoot. Or other species have these large heads with strong mandibles. Pero meron namang mandibles ganun. They're bent out of shape. And you look at them, sino nag-design ito? Somebody, was this designed by a committee of drunks? Because the mandibles are shaped, bent out of shape. There's no way that they can break anything with that. But turns out the physics is different. It's a lock like that. And when they snap open, the mandibles snap open, they break the insect parts that hit it. They break the ant. Okay? Pinapalo nila. They don't bite it. They snap at it. They break it. They swing at it. So, termites are predated on by ants. You will be happy to know that many native ant species specialize in eating ants. I mean, specialize in eating termites. There are also ants that specialize in eating ants. But many ants, like the huntics, those with the sharp stings and the mandibles that open like that, oh, they love termites. And if you want to watch them, their activity, just break open a mouth. Oh, of course, before you do that, you have to bleed a white chicken and say some prayers. Diba? Baka magalit yung no? No, I'm just kidding. So you can maybe break open a termite mound and just watch the ants come in. They will smell the termites, they will swarm in, but they won't eat everything. They will stop at certain point. Tataka ka. There's so much food there. They will not eat everything. They will leave that for the next time that they will raid it. Para palaging meron. So yes, termites and ants are found together because the ants are predators of termites. Does that answer your question, Ronald?
Yes, I have a satisfactory answer. Thank you.
Okay. I see Doc Georgian raising her hand also.
Pwede ba? Just two quick questions, Dave. First, the firefly question. Kasi may firefly tours sa Thailand and Malaysia, and very specific yung species ng mangrove, no? Of course, mangrove, which is Solnaratia casulariis. And yet, when I went to Iwahig sa Palawan and another river in Bohol, at least 3 to 5 species I saw fireflies, no? The next day, of course. That's the first question. The second question is about ants, yung weaver ants mo. It's a very personal question, which is what to do if 2 weaver ants get into your eyeball, no? Tapos, of course, you take out the ants, i-wash out mo, no? Pero walang eye doctor kasi it was the day the day after Odette. Lahat ng hospitals were closed, no? So tapos masakit pa rin yung eyes ko kasi nga ewan ko, naging battlefield, but luckily at the end of the day merong provincial hospital doctor nandoon, Odette or no Odette, nandun siya, no? So I really doff my hat to these mga unsung doctors, no, who kahit sila yung mga bahay nila, they're there at the hospital. Anyway, he saved my eye, I think. But my question is, kasi sabi mo formic acid plus parang battlefield daw yung eye ko when he took a look at it, no, my eyeball. Dalawang weavers ba naman nandun?
Yeah, wow.
What would I do if somehow walang if another typhoon comes and then that thing happens again? Ang daming weavers kasi sa garden ko, as you would guess, no? And I don't spray them. I mean, I welcome them. So if it happens again and then another worst typhoon at wala na talagang eye doctors, what should I do after I wash out the ant or ants? Yun.
Okay, I'll answer that second question first. That's all you can do. You can just have to flush it out, continue to flush. Ang problema is the formic acid may have already damaged your cornea, or at least that outer layer of your eye. And then just hope that it will recover. Usually naman, very shallow damage like that will recover. it won't affect the deeper parts of your eyeball. Kasi yung formic acid naman, kakunting amount lang yun eh. But the reason we react to it is because there is a wound, there is a puncture. Now in your case, pumasok sa mata nyo, the actual capture of the ant by your eyelids already induced it to spray. It did not, I don't think it bit into your eyeball. Kasi if it bit into your eyeball, it would need to be in the proper position to apply the mandibles. So, I don't
Dalawa
think,
sila.
yes.
Baka naggera pa yung dalawa dun sa,
Hindi naman,
sa
hindi
mata
naman.
ko. Oh, sige,
Nagkataon
sige,
lang.
oo.
Both of them may have sprayed formic acid in your eyeball. And our eyeballs, our corneas are not designed to receive harsh chemicals like formic acid. And how is your eye now, by the way? Has it recovered?
Well, it was saved, no? 5 days of really high dose, 500 milligrams, yun na antibiotics. And then, ang daming, yung pus na lumabas for 1
yes,
week.
yes, yes.
That was how,
Irritate.
yeah, ang daming bacteria, you can guess. No? But anyway, siguro I would self-medicate. Worst case scenario, kung walang doktor, marami namang antibiotics dyan na siguro ganun na lang, rather than lose my eye next time.
And also, I would recommend that you wear those goggles na sarado. Not your diving goggles. Meron namang nabibiling goggles na plastic lang. And that will at least protect your eyes in case you go out in a windy day. Baka mapatakan na naman kayo. It doesn't have to be a typhoon. It might be a windy day. By the way, the weaver ants will jump on you if you approach their nest tree where their actual larvae are. They are more sensitive, more protective. If you approach their nest tree, you just walk under it, dadapuan ka, they'll jump on you, and then next thing you know, they'll pinch you somewhere on your body you didn't know. Okay. So the next question, the other question, the first question, the mangrove. Yes, I've been to that Iwahig tour.
River.
And it is funny because the guide, I had to correct the guide. Kasi sabi niya, number 1, dapat bawal ang maingay. Okay. Number 2, ano pa yun? Parang, well, I was happy that he said, no smoking. Great, because I don't smoke. But I also noticed that as the bangka was going forward, there was bioluminescent bacteria on the water, which was not a good sign for me kasi that is caused by pollution. Those bacteria are alive there because the water is polluted. And I guess it's the community toilet. So, but anyway, okay. Now, I saw the fireflies. They are synchronous. And I collected a few samples. Pero I have still not gone past the point of identifying them. And in fact, I don't know where the samples are. I think they're in the National Museum now. Bahala na si Perry doon. But yes, it's interesting that there are 3 species sa atin of mangrove. Hindi lang yun eh. It's not only the mangroves. Apparently, these fireflies on those mangroves, those river tours. By the way, there's also one in Donsol, in case you're in Donsol. There's another firefly tour there in Donsol. Those fireflies are probably aquatic yung larvae. That's why they need to be over water, right?
Okay.
Pero yung terrestrial fireflies, like the one I saw in Camarines Sur, those would be, the females would be lying in the undergrowth, hiding in the grass, hiding in the dead leaves. Yun ang pwedeng sirain mo if you're too bent on having a nice Forbes Park type lawn in your area. You're not going to get fireflies there.
Okay.
No, you should be living in the bulldogs of Surigao or whatever. Yung, kung ano itsura ng forest floor, yun ang gawin mo sa forest sa area mo. All those dead leaves lying around, let them be. So that you will encourage firefly. Make it a firefly-friendly environment. I hope that answers your questions, Dr. Jen.
Salamat, Dave.
Thank you, then.
Thank you. There are many questions, but I will ask the question here for 2 people who have already brought it up. It's termites and trees. beneficial or not? Take it away, Dave.
Okay. I consider termites as beneficial. The only time that they are not beneficial is when they damage structures. Kasi ang structure, pinaggastusan yan. Saka may halaga yan. May gamit natin yan. But in the typical farm or even forest environment, termites are beneficial. They cycle the nutrients of dead wood, dead leaves, dead tissues, dead stems, into nutrients that the plants and the trees can absorb back. So they are very important in the speeding up of the nutrient cycle from the tree to the dead leaf or the dead wood, back to the soil, and then back to the tree. Yung function na yon is mediated by termites and among other things. So in a typical, in a natural setting, termites are very beneficial. Even in a coconut farm, for example. Basta malayo sa bahay mo, yung punso doon, you let the nuno take care of the dead plant material there. They will cycle all those dead plant material into nutrients for your coconut trees.
Yeah, Dave, I think our members, PNTE members are also interested kung threat ba ang termites sa kanilang mga tinanim na native trees.
Yes. No, the answer is no. You will probably see trails of termites going up live trees. You've seen that, diba? Ang kinakain lang nila is the dead bark just on the surface. They don't eat the whole tree. There are also arboreal termite mounds. You will see a huge mound of mud, dried mud, on the side of a tree trunk. I think you've observed that. Maybe not, but I'll tell you about it. Trust me, I know these things. So there will be a mud nest on the tree trunk, and the termites that live there are interesting kasi yung workers nila, yung soldiers nila, have this pointed nozzle at the top of the head on the fontanelle, and they spray toxic chemicals against ants. Mas maliit yung soldier kaysa dun sa worker. Pero specialist na siya. Has that sprayer. And again, they don't eat live trees. They don't eat live tissues, plant tissues. They like dead things, dead plants. Okay, did that answer the question, Doc M?
So termites are our friend.
Yes.
All right. So Dave, there's a question here that where Miguel, are you here? Miguel Imperial says, our specialty coffee industry is on a steady rise. Very general, but have you worked with or in coffee farms? And just want to know more about the intersection of coffee, native trees, and insects.
I have not worked in coffee, but I have observed that industry for a time. Now, if you really want to produce specialty coffee, there's such a thing as shade coffee. Shade coffee is a high-end product in Central America because they grow coffee under the shade of native trees. Okay? And apparently the microclimate in the shade of native trees, or at least in the shade of large trees, is different, and it produces a different quality of coffee. So you might say it's branding, no, but a lot of research has been done on shade coffee, and you would be, I would encourage you to study shade coffee. Now, ants and coffee, yeah, there is a very strong interaction. I like to drink coffee while I'm reading about ants or studying my ants. Does that answer your question? No.
Nice.
Ants in your coffee fields or coffee farms, they're beneficial. For example, yung Dolichoderus thoracicus, the ant that goes around in you're familiar with this ant. It goes around on your lanzones, on your rambutan, no? Those black ants. If you go to a fruit stand and it'll point to ants that are running around their lanzones for sale and say, yan yung swerting langaw. That's the one, Dolichoderus thoracicus. Dolichoderus thoracicus are omnivores, they will predate on the coffee borer. Okay? They have been shown to eat the coffee borer beetle, meaning to say they're able to prevent the coffee borer beetle from laying eggs on your coffee. So, beneficial. How did they know that? How did they know that these ants were eating coffee borer and coffee and cacao pod borers? They looked at the DNA of their gut contents of the larvae of the ants. And nandun yung DNA nung pod borer at the coffee and cacao pod borer. Nandun yung DNA sa loob ng bituka ng ant larvae. How did it get there? Because they ate it. Okay? Does that answer the question, Miguel?
Amazing.
Was that Miguel?
Yes, that was Miguel who asked.
Somebody is raising his question. Toto is raising his question.
Otto, you can unmute yourself.
Magandang araw po, magandang araw, Doc. Ang ganda po ng kwento, no, patungkol sa interaction ng insects tsaka ng mga puno at mga halaman. Component ito para sa isang functioning ecosystem. No, ang tanong ko po ay nangyayari ba ito sa setting na kung saan ay mas marami yung exotic trees? Based on your experience, gusto ko lang makita kung may ganun pa ring interaction. Yun lang po yung tanong ko.
Okay. Magandang tanong yun, Toto. I have examined in Los Baños with thesis students, yung long-term, maybe it's a 40-year-old mahogany stand of the College of Forestry on Mount Makiling. So they still have a 40-plus-year-old mahogany stand on Mount Makiling. And right beside it, there is a natural regeneration stand. So what I asked my students to do was to examine the ants of both localities and compare. Ants lang. Okay? Napaka-konti yung ants dun sa mahogany. Now, what does that mean? Since ants are also mediating nutrient cycling processes, there are few mediators of that process in the mahogany. And you can extrapolate that it will also happen in plantations of exotic species like falcata, melina, and mahogany. Mahogany definitely very poor. When I was in Palawan, I was sifting leaf litter under mahogany, and I found hardly anything. Wala. If you look at your mahogany trees, do you see even spiders? Wala. Spiders don't even nest there. There are the branches, there are the shade. It's perfect if it were not mahogany. But since there are no insects there, they will move out. Okay? So mahoganies are, I don't know, that's just my term right now. It's my opinion. They're green deserts because there's nothing else growing in them. The sooner you replace your mahogany with native trees, the better. Now, you might ask the question, actually, si Ed Wilson had this statement, the late Dr. Wilson. Sabi niya, globally, the weight of ants, all the ants in the world, and the weight of people, all the people in the world, is almost equal. Yun yung equation niya, almost equal. However many billions of people there are, the weight of ants, the biomass of ants is almost the same. Given that equation, alisin mo lahat ng tao sa mundo, remove all the humans from the world, nature will flourish. Remove all the ants from the world, nature will die. There will be nothing will happen. They will all die. We will all die. So ganon, let nature take care of itself. I wasn't able to share the story, but I will share it anyway. A little off, not really off topic. Yung visit ng Harvard researcher, which I was discussing before this talk, we sampled an area that was a 27-year-old Nara reforestation project of my uncle. Before the Nara, he planted falcata and it failed. But before Falcata, it was a corn and upland rice. So barren, empty. Then he decided, I'll plant trees. Nagkamali siya sa Falcata. Tinumba ng bagyo. He planted Nara and it survived. 27 years later, we come around and study the ants. Okay, we ran a 250-meter transect. In that 250 meters, we collected something like 260 species of ants. Many undescribed, including 15 genera not known to exist in the Philippines at that time. Talagang napanganga yung taga-Harvard. We collected more than one species per linear meter of that transect. 250 meters, and then it's 10 meters wide. So basically, the area we collected from was 1/4 hectare, okay, of native trees. Now, to compare, all of Japan has about 290 species. All of Japan, 290 species of ants. So how diverse is the Philippines? Amazing, amazingly diverse. Parang ang Madagascar on steroids. Okay, so we let nature take care of itself. What happened in that Nara plantation? What happened is that when the Nara was growing, native trees were there, and native undergrowth, yung propagules from Mount Isarog National Park found a good place to nest. Ganon. Okay? And then as tree branches fell and rotted on the ground, again, there was more habitat. So if you want to encourage and develop your tree farm for habitat purposes, whether it's for birds, for herbs, for insects, leave dead wood on the ground. There has to be dead wood. Kung aanahin, all the better kasi that will be processed by the termites into nutrients for your plants. Dead wood. What is the difference between primary forest and secondary forest and even worse forest? The amount of dead wood on the ground. That is one difference. The more dead wood on the ground, the better the habitat is. Okay? Kaya yung mga logging operations where they clear cut and then leave nothing on the ground, bad yun, bad. So leave dead wood on the ground.
So
Okay.
say no to manicured, pristine
Oh, no.
homesteads areas. Yeah, that's the tendency.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
So Toto, I hope that answered your question. Marami pa pong question actually. There is April. This is really far up in the chat pa. April Rose Monding asked,
Oh, hi.
Are there-
Hi.
are there any studies related to myrmecodomic ants?
Ah. Okay. Now you might be referring to hi April. I actually advised April on her thesis, right? And well, I identified her ants. Now, myrmecodomic. Are you saying this is something like parasitic ants on other ants?
Sir, those ants living in the Myrmecodia plants, sir, inside.
Oh,
Those you mentioned
okay.
about the bulbous, yes, sir. Those.
Oh yes, yes. Yes, there are many plants that encourage ants to nest. No? For example, yung Dischidia, they stick their leaves on the trunk, di ba? Dischidia and Hoya, may mga dahon na, may mga leaves sila that are cup shape, and they stick to that tree trunk, and that makes nice cavity for ants to nest there. But if you tear that open, you will see that there are roots. So the roots are there to absorb whatever trash the ants leave in the cavity. So yung Myrmecodia, dito sa Philippines, we have a species called Iridomyrmex myrmecodiae that tells you immediately, I think these ants like Myrmecodia. Well, they like to live in Myrmecophilous plants. And I've seen them in several places in Mindanao. Yes, so there are not that many studies of their behavior, but you can, if you Google the species name, maybe look for it in AntWiki, you will find a key to, or at least an open door to other references or studies that uh, studied myrmecodius plants and ants, plants and ants. I keep mixing those up. Okay, does that answer your question, April?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay. Wait, does that mean that you're interested in studying behavior? Okay. Sige, that will be fun. But sige, I encourage you to do that. Follow your interest and see what you can do. Now, for literature review, you go to the species page first and look at the references at the bottom and go further. If you want to ask an expert on the subfamily of Dolichoderini, is a guy named Steve Shattuck. He's also one of the administrators of AntWiki. You can find him there. Very friendly guy.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Sure.
Good luck, April. Again, so many questions. I'll read out Willie Herrera's question. Do we have bullet ants in the Philippines? How about cutter ants?
Leaf cutter ants? No. Bullet ants? No. They're all in Central America. We have a lot of stinging ants, but none that will develop or that deliver a sting as painful as the bullet ant.
Okay.
And we don't have leaf cutters. The leaf cutting activity, as I showed in my presentation, is done by bees, the megachile bees.
Yes. There are beetles also, I think, right? That, or no, they cut stems.
Well, yes, the longhorn beetles will cut stems and drop off the buds, but beetles will produce that kind of a damage, but they'll eat the leaves directly. Yung megachile bees, they take it as a nesting material.
Interesting. Again, moving on to the next question, Paul Engler asks, are there any species of insects we should be especially concerned about if we notice them among our native trees that would warrant controlling them? Maybe invasive insects that are especially harmful.
Yeah, that's a good question. No, instead of looking at the insects, you look at your leaves, your plants. See if there is level of herbivory. Okay, you might have insects there, but there's no damage to your trees. What are you worried about? They are just there. Okay. Many, I would say many, but probably most insects are either beneficial or benign. There are very, very few that are damaging. Very, very few. So observe your trees first. If there is no herbivory, go back and drink your coffee. But if there's herbivory, then you probably should investigate. And if it is a level of herbivory that you can tolerate, it's just a few leaves, and then you see a butterfly. Oh, maybe the caterpillars are eating that. So it's up to you. How much can you risk? How much can you afford? How many leaves can you allow for herbivory to see colorful butterflies? Something like that. It's all conceptual. It's all up to you. Okay. Some people will burn everything because they see a leaf that has been bitten by something. No, I'm not just kidding. I'm just exaggerating. But yeah, it's first look at your herbivory. If there is a level of herbivory that you cannot tolerate, then you take action. But if not, then leave it alone because that is the cycle of life. Okay, did that answer your question, Paul?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, there's a follow-up question, but I think you would have answered this. I ask it anyway. How should we manage termite mounds close to our trees? Should we destroy or leave them? I think you already answered that. Termites are our friends?
Yes, termites are our friends, but you would be well advised to raise a bunch of white chickens every so often. You might need to bleed them. Or invite me because those are delicious.
Or the ants.
Yeah. Termites are beneficial unless they attack your structures. That is it. Otherwise, they are beneficial.
All right. Good. Question from Sir Vic Ramos. What benefits do stem borers provide?
Oh, well, in the first place, if you have stem borers in your trees, expect to have woodpeckers. Yes, woodpeckers specialize on eating stem borer larvae. They will not peck on your trees kung walang stem borer sa loob. Now, if you don't care for woodpeckers and then you won't care for stem borers. But usually, stem borers are, I'm hoping you're referring to those that are in the trees, not in the corn. Corn and rice stem borers are very damaging, but for trees, they are few and far between. They are very few and far between. And if you're fortunate that you have a tree nearby that has a stem borer and you hear a tok, 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 oh, that is a life experience. That is a lifer. Wouldn't you want to have that? I guess not. Maybe so you just deal with the stem borer. No, but as I said, that is what the woodpeckers are specializing. Stem borer larvae. Larvae of cerambicids, larvae of some scarabids, I think, but mainly cerambicids and buprestids. The click beetles and the longhorn beetles.
Sir Vic, I hope Dave was able to answer your question.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. We have a question from Louis Parunga. I hope you're still here. What about cocolisap? How can we prevent infestation of cocolisap?
You have this device called a rosary. You can pray the rosary. No, I'm just kidding.
No.
Cocolisap, okay. Ganito yun eh. There are it's a cycle of infestations. And this is really, the outbreaks are caused by a decline in the population of the control insect, the wasps that actually control the cocolisap. So when in certain years, especially in drought years, mainly drought years, the population of those beneficial wasps declines. At the same time, tuloy-tuloy naman yung breed ng cocolisap. They release their larvae into the air, and if they're lucky to land on a coconut tree, they will stay there and live and then release more. So during the drought years, the coconut trees are a little stressed because water stressed. So their defenses are a little less. And then the beneficial wasps are reduced in population. Then you have an outbreak. But as soon as the population of the beneficial wasps recovers, the outbreak stops. Tapos na. So it's a cycle. What can you do? Like I said, take a rosary and pray that you don't have a drought. Otherwise, if you apply chemicals, you're damaging more things than you really needed to do. Okay?
So sounds like you have to ride it out if there is a
Yes.
drought.
Mainly ganun. Yeah. Oh, si Toto, nagtaas na naman ng kamay.
Okay, Toto, go ahead.
Doc, ewan ko lang kung tama, no, about the cocolisap. Siguro para ma-invite natin yung wasp bilang predator nila, we have to diversify, no? Yun lang yung ano ko. Diversify yung plants, yung trees para may habitat yung wasp para to control the cocolisap. Tama po ba, Doc?
Yeah, there's a sense of truth to that. But these wasps are almost specialists on the cocolisap. So there's a partnership, no? Kumbaga, if you have a certain population of cocolisap, it will support a certain population of wasps. Okay? Pagbagsak ng population ng wasp because of stresses, the drought, ito ang dadami. Until humabol ito siya, then it will bring it down to another level. Balanse na naman sila. They're specialists. And they were the scientists who discovered these specialist predators. Just looked at the cocolizap and waited for the wasp to come out of the dead cocolizap and identify those wasps. Ganun lang yun. Paris-paris lang. You can't swing a net and try to catch those things. No. Yeah. So if you have no cocolizap problem in your farm, that means that your population of predatory wasps or beneficial wasps is at the right level and you're doing great. Oh, may tumaas na naman si Doc Georgian.
Dr.
Good.
Jen, go ahead.
Can I follow up on that cocolizap? Kasi twice na ako na banned from bringing yung palm species. The first was from Leyte. Meron naman akong something from Visayas State University, so pumayag. But the second was after PNTE, Dave, meron akong saribos. So dun sa naiya na hold up kasi palm daw. And blanket talaga, all palm species hindi pwedeng mag-move between certain islands. So
Yes.
anong comment mo doon? Napaka-draconian naman noon, no? Walang talaga. It's just blanket, walang science in fact. So what's your reaction to that?
I beg to disagree that there is no science. There is science to that. Okay, number one of the things we have to appreciate is that because we have an island structure, there are natural barriers to the movement of pest insects. And we have to take full advantage of those natural barriers. And quarantine regulations tries to do that. Okay. Now, what is the science behind this? Some genius enthusiasts of palms, I don't know when, brought in from wherever palm specimens, maybe seeds or living plants from probably Malaysia. And they included hispid beetles, right? Hispid beetles. These hispid beetles and other beetles that specialize on palms have a tendency to infest other palms in the country, which may not be the ornamental palms that they brought in the first place. So what is at risk here? You have the coconut industry, which is probably important. Actually, it's very important. And so you want to protect the coconut industry in different islands by not allowing movement of palms and palm species indeterminately. And a blanket prohibition does that because at any station you don't have specialists that will examine your palm specimen and see if there are no eggs there or no larvae inside the tissue or no pupae in the soil. There's no way. So it's better to make a blanket prohibition than to say, sige, kilala naman kita, Doc Georgian, you're a PhD of renown, okay lang. What if you have pupae in the soil of your plant? Ikaw na ngayon ang nagdala. Don't you want that to be prevented? So as I said, appreciate that kasi our island structure is a very strong barrier against the spread of diseases and pests. Very, very strong. So we use barriers like to augment those natural barriers. We use those prohibitions and inspections. Kailangan na kailangan natin. They are very beneficial to us. Okay.
Thank you for the
Thank
question,
you.
Dr. Jen. Celes asked this question, a common question with a lot of plantitos and plantitas. What is an organic way to control aphids or white insects in my plants in the garden?
Okay. Bitin ba? Bitin.
Mahirap ba?
Hindi. I was trying to elicit a response. Alam mo, yung organic is yung sa akin yung I might think it's organic, but there are people who consider a certain level of chemical use already violating their organic principles. Okay. Pero mas mabuti na lang is a cheap. I would recommend a cheap way. No? Aphids and mealybugs and sapsuckers in your sapsucking insects in your garden lang. Very simple. You have your plastic bottle of sprayer, yung hand sprayer na ganon. 1 liter. Okay. You buy water. No, don't. You use tap water. I said cheap. Tap water, 1 liter of tap water. 1 to 2 drops of dish detergent. That's it. And spray that on your. You can spray that on your aphids and your mealybugs every day. Kasi bakit every day? Well, first, what is the science behind this? The liquid detergent lowers the surface tension of the water. Just the surface tension. It's not toxic to the insect. Because it lowers the surface tension, the water enters the spiracles of the insect, whatever it is, and it drowns. Okay? But the aphids are replaced by the ants that like to eat their honeydew. So the next day, meron na naman. So bigyan mo naman. Next time. So you'll have a very strong hand eventually. No? And you have a very strong grip. Now you can grip and greet Paul Engler over there with a very strong handshake, and he'll be very impressed. But ganun lang yun. You just have to continue spraying and spraying and spraying. Exercise. Kasi dinadala talaga ng langgam. The ants really bring new populations of aphids to your plants. Okay? So it just has to be. Because the ants will also be benefiting you in other ways. So deal with it. Ganun lang. Okay?
Thank you. I'll just read out the comment. We will be wrapping up soon, but I just wanted to read out this comment. Noel Mendegoren said, I remember the Cocolisa infestation in southern Tagalog that ended after a typhoon. So I just thought I'd bring that up because yeah, it was a natural occurrence that ended it. So nature has a way of dealing with these things, no? And then there are very many comments thanking, congratulating everyone. Brew gave this tip. She said, you know, too much aphids just means you have too much nitrogen. So if you diminish the nitrogen, then that means bawas dilig ng rice water. If you're using too much rice water, then that might help with your aphid infestation.
I'd like to comment on that. Yung rice water has no nitrogen. And it's not connected to, the aphid infestation is not connected to the amount of nitrogen. So those things are, it's almost like bleeding white chickens, but I'd rather have the white chickens kasi masarap pag tinola na eh.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Dave. I just want to remind everyone, we posted the link to the survey form. This is your chance to quickly open that so that you have that open in your browsers so you can fill up the survey and complete it, because after we close this whole session, that link will no longer be available. Oh, miss, sinabi pa si Brew. Nabasa niya yun, Dave.
Mabuti naman. Thank you for your humor, sense of humor.
Okay. If there's, last question, otherwise I'll be wrapping it up already and giving the last few announcements. You can just
Gumising na si Doc M. Umuunat na eh. Bagong gising. Morning, Doc M. Did I put you to sleep?
Interesting topics.
May nagtatanong ng contact info
yeah.
ninyo. How do we contact you, sir?
Email nyo na lang siguro. I suggest you can email Dr. General if what do you think, Dr. Dave?
Yeah, you will have to deal with my talent manager, si
Wow.
si Sel Tumol.
Hair off.
Yeah, you can email me at dmgeneral@up.edu.ph. One word lang yun, DM General. No caps.
at up.edu.ph.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Dave,
already
pwede bang one last?
I posted it in the chat room. Your
Basil, one
email.
last lang.
Oh, sige po,
Dr.
Doctor.
Jim.
One last, yes or no lang ang answer. Is it fair to say na yung pollination, you give that to the insects mostly, but the dispersal would be for the
Bats.
animals, the bats, the the bats and the birds. Of course, may exceptions, no? Not to mention yung physical, yung wind, water, pero in general lang, would that be a fair statement, Dave? Yes or no lang? Thanks.
Maybe.
Okay. Sige, mag-usap tayong zoologist. Pareho naman tayong zoologist later. Yeah, okay.
Depende sa location. Depende sa location. Kasi kulang pa yung studies natin ng mimicry. Kulang na kulang. We
Okay.
need to know. We don't know. Basically, we don't know. Kaya maybe.
Thanks. Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll say goodbye. I was glad to have shared with you a little of my kalokohan. And this is what keeps me up at night, thinking about how I can study the world better and what discoveries will I make tomorrow. And I always have that. Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dave General. Really quite an interesting morning with all your sharing. So many questions that we were not even able to bring up that were asked previously, but before we end, I'd just like to announce a few things, just a reminder on the survey again. And then for those who are not yet a member of Philippine Native Tree Enthusiasts, you may join our group in Facebook. And you will just have to answer a few questions so that the admins will allow you to join the group. And then this year is the 10th year anniversary of PNTE, so stay tuned for more details. Apart from the upcoming conversations that we will have, this is just the first, thanks to Dr. General here. And then I'd just like to quickly share my screen. I have some things that I'd like to quickly share. We have the book Alay, Philippine Native Trees by Sir Victor Ramos, who was also in this session today. His book is available through Sel Tungal. So if you'd like to get a copy of your book, the publisher's price is 1,200. A lot of us already have our copies, but if you'd like to gift it to friends, please reach out to Sel. And lastly, promise guys, this is the last already. If you want any of the PNTE merchandise, please reach out to Jovic Lasap. We have a few more of the umbrellas, bags, and the PNTE t-shirts. So you can promote the PNTE group. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you in the next conversations.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.